welcome to our weekly Q&A. My name's Schepis.
Lyndon, Purcell.
And we're here to answer all your questions on training, nutrition, and everything else in between. And we've got a question from
Brandon Lowe today.
And what does Brandon ask?
Brandon asks a question relating to macronutrient setup, or how many grams of each macro you should eat based on your body weight. Does the ratio of these change between male and females? What Brandon's heard is that females should increase fat intake due to hormonal factors. So probably assuming that calories and everything are the same, but just that balance between carbohydrate and fat ratio.
And protein, yeah.
Actually protein, yeah.
So in terms of, I think the first thing we need to tackle in this question is macronutrient setup in general.
Yeah.
And then we can discuss female physiological differences that would influence how we set that up. So obviously if your goal is body composition related, it's pretty undisputable that you need moderate to high protein intake, anywhere between 1.8 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight each day. Anywhere between that range and you're going to be golden.
Yeah.
That's pretty simple. In terms of fat and carbohydrate intake, this is where a lot of people really get caught up in, worrying about, the nuances, nuances of diet, setup and all the rest of it. But if calories are held the same, I think it's pretty much fair to say that as long as you're hitting your protein within your calorie intake and you're not eliminating one or the other, you're going to be fine. It's very much a matter of preference, as well as tolerance. Yes, some people tolerate high carbohydrate diets better than others, but you'll find over time where your preference lies, as well as your tolerance lies, and really letting what you can stick to for the longest period of time dictate what you consume. And if you're somebody who craves carbs all the time, but you're trying to go on a really low carb diet and you find yourself binging regularly, then a low carb diet simply isn't working, so you need to introduce some carbohydrates to your diet. Conversely, you might be somebody who just really loves eating fat and protein, you thrive on that kind of diet, and you only like to eat veggies, and you can function really well and you don't have any issues with your energy performance, then a higher fat intake is definitely something that you could use. And this holds true for females as well.
Yeah, exactly. As you'll probably begin to learn with all these Q&As and these discussions that Jacob and I have, Jacob really does bring a practical sense and things that, the theory says one thing, but what works in the real world? And Jacob is 100% correct that it comes back to calories and getting sufficient protein. They are the huge rocks of this situation. I can touch on now what the science slightly says, but take it with a grain of salt, as I'm saying. It really does just depend. Females do somewhat tend to not tolerate carbohydrates as well, due to them being, so we take equivalent body weights of male and female, so we've got a 70 kilo male and a 70 kilo female, due to hormonal factors such as testosterone and IGF and that kind of stuff. Males will tend to have more lean mass, which first means they probably need slightly more protein, and then means they have slightly more places to deposit carbs within the body. Correct. So
insulin sensitivity is higher.
Yeah, exactly right. They have more places to just put carbs basically, whereas females have less muscle and less tissue to deposit carbohydrates in. Therefore, once those stores fill up, there's a lot more glucose just sitting around the body ready waiting to be stored and that sort of thing, contributing to insulin resistance, that sort of thing. Additionally, there's some research that shows whereas males predominantly burn carbohydrates during exercise and then fat throughout the day, females slightly struggle with this and they tend to burn more fat during exercise, which sounds good but isn't really ideal because fat is a bit of a less
7 period.
Fat is
oxidized.
Less fat is oxidized because then carbohydrates are burned throughout the day, and fat is the inferior fuel to use during exercise, really. So we want to use carbohydrates as much as we can to ensure high performance, high power outputs, bigger disruption to homeostasis, and create better adaptations. So the fact that males have more lean tissue, and then so that affects their protein to an extent, and then the fact that they have higher lean tissue and they can probably tolerate carbohydrates to a better extent is probably all that really needs to be touched on from my end at this stage.
And yeah, I agree 110% with what Lyndon is saying, and it really does make a difference in terms of how females tolerate glucose due to these factors, which is why a lot of women, if they're on an extremely high carbohydrate diet, low fat and then low protein, will struggle to see any favourable body composition progress. So in that situation, does it mean you should eliminate carbohydrates? Definitely not, but cyclically having low carbohydrate days with high carbohydrate days, around training and on off days, and having that kind of setup within a female diet can be extremely beneficial, because you can then take advantage of some of these physiological differences that we're speaking of.
Another important thing to consider is females get what's known as PCOS, and they have some issues surrounding that, which is specific to them and not males. And definitely one of the ways to help alleviate some of those problems is to reduce carbohydrate intake and increase fat intake equivalently. But yeah, as Jacob mentioned at the start, if you're trying to lose weight, calorie deficit number one, sufficient protein number two based on your needs, and then the rest really do just become minor details.
And a final note on all of this is that the menstrual cycle can play a big role in terms of what a female is craving in terms of nutrition and what they want to eat. And what I've done to great success with some female clients is increase their carbohydrate intake around the menstrual cycle when they get those cravings, obviously keeping calories the same. But if you try to cut out carbohydrates when females are getting those cravings near menses and when they're about to get deep into their cycle, that can be problematic. So understanding that there's 4 different phases to the female menstrual cycle, and how each of those phases affects a woman physiologically can also play a role in terms of how we adjust macronutrient intake. And it's really important to understand that there is a huge individual variation in terms of how much the menstrual cycle plays a role, females, hunger and energy and performance and all the rest of it. So it is a case-by-case basis, but just understand that plays a role as well.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point that Jacob goes into, and we won't discuss that too much because it's not the time or the place. But if you're a male coach, definitely, attempt to learn and track and just try and get inside the head of a female as much as you can when these things occur. Like, yes, it's all good and well for us to sit here and say, macros, calories, but there's a whole lot going on that we will never be able to experience in our life.
Yeah.
So you really do need to try and empathize with female clients as much as you can. And the best way to do that is gain knowledge through the appropriate sources.
So guys, we hope we answered your question, Brad. Brandon. If you have any further questions, guys, feel free to comment below and we'll speak to you next time.